Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That was a brief look at a performance by the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra. It's a group of some 75 Ukrainians, including recent refugees, that was formed as a gesture of solidarity with the victims of Russia's war against Ukraine. The newly formed orchestra is fresh off a summer-long tour that took them throughout the United States and Europe, including performances right here in the city. It's all a collaboration by the Polish National Orchestra and the Metropolitan Opera, led by one of my next guests, Canadian-Ukrainian conductor Keri-Lynn Wilson. Now, the money raised from the tour is going to support Ukrainian artists. And joining me now to talk about that, this unique effort of using art for advocacy and a lot more, is the conductor behind it, Keri-Lynn Wilson, along with her husband, Peter Gelb, the general manager of the Metropolitan Opera. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Congratulations on this. This sounds like an amazing adventure. How did this come about? How did you get involved?
It all started at the beginning of the invasion, where my horror wanted to transform itself into action. My cousins, who are in Ukraine, were in Donbass at the start of the invasion, and I have several colleagues and musicians and friends and dear beloved ones who were in Ukraine at the start of the invasion with whom I was communicating, and hearing them being silenced in their basements while I had the freedom to perform when I was in Europe. Actually, I just felt the need to do something. And as a musician, the obvious choice was to think of a way that I could help give an opportunity for my colleagues to play and have their voices back that Putin had silenced. So the best choice was to create it was a fantasy, it was a dream to start an orchestra of refugees.
And this has the sort of the formal blessing of the Ukrainian government. I understand that some people got released from military service in order to join the orchestra.
That's correct. It was a huge process, a long process, but ultimately when I expressed my horror to Peter, he heard me crying for weeks as I was working. I was coming home to my hotel and just watching in horror the images on the television. Mm-hmm. And Peter heard my shouts of horror, and I told him this idea. So he took the action by this incredible, sophisticated, huge planning to turn this dream into reality.
And you basically conferred, I guess, with some of your counterparts overseas and put this thing together.
Well, from the beginning, the Met has, from the very day the invasion began, the Met has been a staunch ally of Ukraine on the artistic front, and we undertook a series of actions, concerts for Ukraine, and when Keri-Lynn came to me with this idea, I immediately sprung into action and called my counterpart at the Polish National Opera. I called my contacts in the Ministry of Culture in Ukraine, with whom I had already been working. The Polish Opera contacted the Polish government, and within a matter of just a couple of days, we were mobilized. And normally a tour like this would be set up 2 years or so in advance, but because of this importance of the cause, venues like the London Proms or the Lincoln Center Outdoor Festival, all of them rallied around this idea and made themselves available. So a tour that would normally take a couple of years to put together was put together in a month.
I associate some of this with Zelensky being an artist, right? That they would naturally turn to the same way that they've sort of used the techniques of drama and of television to sort of to help make their case to the world.
Well, President Zelensky, is very well aware of the Russian use of art as propaganda, and so am I. And he, really feels that part of what Putin is trying to do is to destroy the soul of the country, to destroy their spirit and their artistic legacy, their cultural legacy. So, I really believe very strongly that the Metropolitan Opera is at war, has joined the war effort against Russia, and we are fighting on the cultural side of it. And Keri-Lynn is one of the generals out there doing it.
Yeah.
And I should just jump in, because he obviously did this incredible organization, but the real challenge initially was to find these musicians.
Sure.
So I thought, there at the border, coming in from Ukraine, flowing into Poland, must be a wealth of musicians. And his idea to contact the Polish National Opera was an obvious choice, because also I had worked there many times. And it turned out that the principal trumpeter of the opera, he's Ukrainian. So he had a lot of contacts, and he ended up being our inspector, as we call him in Ukrainian, he organized finding all these musicians. So
And it must have been tough. These are not people who have played together for the most part,
exactly.
right?
75 musicians, most of which have never played together. And we were thrown together for 10 days in rehearsals in Warsaw. That was our artistic home at the Polish National Opera in July, before embarking on this fantastic international tour that brought us to New York, which was such a thrill.
But they really became a first-class orchestra.
No doubt, right? I wanted to talk about the new production of, at the Met of Lady Macbeth of the Mtsensk district, which I did not know was, I knew that Dmitri Shostakovich, the composer, had been banned at some point and had gotten into some trouble with the authorities in the 30s and 40s.
He was always in trouble.
But this was sort of central to that. This was
his masterpiece that he wrote at the age of 26. That when Stalin saw it, said it was a muddle and a case of Western perversion. And not only was Shostakovich in trouble from getting a bad review from Stalin, he was in danger of his life. He never wrote another opera again. But one of the principles of the Met has been, in spite of Putin's cries of self-pity in which he claims that the entire Western world has ganged up against him and that we've canceled Russian culture, part of what the Met is proving through its actions is by presenting great works of Russian art. We are showing that we care about Russian art, we care about Russian artists. There are 3 Russians in this cast, in fact, who had to go to great trouble to get into this country with no direct flights and visas being so hard to get by these days. So we want to show Russia, and we want to show the world that our fight is with Putin, not with the poor Russian people who themselves are hostages to what Putin is doing.
Right. I saw somewhere in there that you said, we're against Putin, not Pushkin, right?
I said we want to cancel Putin, not Pushkin.
Yeah, okay, good enough. Yet another artistic challenge and a way to sort of channel some of what began as horror.
Exactly. I channeled all my horror and energy through conducting, and this is a perfect work for me because actually I have a very close relationship with Moscow, with the Bolshoi Theater. I did.
You had.
Right, it's past tense until Putin's out of office and they recognize Ukraine as a sovereign country. I also had a very good relationship with the archive, Shostakovich Archive in Moscow, and I've done all this incredible research before coming here to the Met for the opera. But what is important is the fact that with this work, Shostakovich, he was silenced. And it shows by playing this incredible work. It's this full force. It has bandas, it has phenomenal size orchestra and chorus. It's just bombshell of energy. It's such a powerful voice. And for me, it's a way of shouting at Putin that you cannot silence Ukraine. And this is what it feels like an organic transition from the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra to performing Russian repertoire. It's okay.
Sure.
It's against oppression.
It sounds like in some ways there is this sort of global cultural effort that matches the global armed effort to try and undo this. Yes. What's the end stage? What comes out of this, do you think?
Just keep on screaming, shouting out loud that Ukraine will not stop fighting until they are a free and sovereign country, and ultimately that will make the Western democratic world a freer and more stable place to live.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. Always great to see you, Peter.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much.
We are going to take a break now. When we come back, I'll be joined by 2 top political consultants to break down this week's top stories. Stay with us.